Hello and welcome. In this session, we are going to learn why PostgreSQL has been so famous and who are the top cloud providers which are providing the PostgreSQL as a managed service. So you can see I have put three logos. So I'll be just talking about those. That's a basic introduction, who is providing and in what form. And then we will talk about the basics of PostgreSQL. Okay, so these are the three top providers of PostgreSQL in cloud. So the first one we are going to talk about it is AWS. So AWS is if we talk about the open source databases, so open source relational databases has been in demand because of their increasing popularity because of no licensing and in the terms of the features which they are being added on regular basis, the new versions which are coming up and they are according to the requirement of the industry. So let's talk about the Postgre because we are talking mostly about Postgre on in this slide, like who are the top providers and in what form it is being provided. So if we talk about the AWS, AWS is providing PostgreSQL as RDS in terms of the managed database instance. So they provide PostgreSQL as PostgreSQL RDS instance and that is having all the major releases so far. I think 13.3 is the current release which is being provided, and same is for the Amazon Aurora cluster as well. So Amazon Aurora cluster is having the two engine. One is for MySQL compatible, and another is for PostgreSQL. So this is also being in good recent news because of its popularity and the amount of the clustering solution it provides for the Postgre. It's tremendous. On the parallel side, we'll talk about some of the open source databases which are very popular and being provided as a managed service from AWS. So it is MySQL and MariaDB. So if you have worked on MySQL, then MariaDB you will not feel any kind of difference because it is a fork out of MySQL. We are not going to talk about the Redshift cluster, wherein at the backend it is going to use the PostgreSQL database as an engine, and it is really used as a data warehouse. And using your database migration services, you can convert the schema from other database engine to PostgreSQL. Let's say you have a big data warehouse of Oracle database, and in case you wanted to convert it to PostgreSQL as a data warehouse solution, so you can use the Redshift cluster. So back behind the scene, it is going to use the Postgre as the database instance. So that's the basic about the AWS, which is providing the open source relational database PostgreSQL in cloud. If you talk about the Google Cloud is also providing PostgreSQL in terms of Cloud SQL. So when we say about the Cloud SQL, it is an umbrella which provides three types of relational database service. One is managed MySQL, like AWS is providing, and another is PostgreSQL, which we are talking about. So this is really doing a lot of things because if we see its report in 2020 fourth quadrant, this has been in news because it is doing tremendously good. So Cloud SQL is really going good in terms of the PostgreSQL and managed MySQL. We are not going to talk about the enterprise level database, a relational database SQL server, but Cloud SQL, it provides PostgreSQL as Cloud SQL. If we talk about the another major cloud service provider, it is Microsoft Azure services. So you can Azure is also providing PostgreSQL as Azure database for PostgreSQL. If we talk about another relational databases, so it is being providing for the MySQL and MariaDB. So you can see PostgreSQL has been so popular that all the top service providers for the cloud, they are providing it as a managed instance. And the reason being is on continual basis there has been a lot of development which are going on at the community level for the Postgre, and this is one of the most favorable relational databases which are available in the market, and it's day by day it is trying to phase out the enterprise level database. So we are not going to talk about the why about the comparison with the enterprise level relational databases with the PostgreSQL, but yes, the kind of the extensions which are coming up, the kind of the development which are happening back behind the scene, and the PostgreSQL is doing great. So the current stable version is 13, and current preview version of 14 is in testing phase. There's just a basic which we have seen earlier as well, like what is PostgreSQL. PostgreSQL or Postgre, they are one and the same thing. It is a free and open source relational databases, and there is a big community which works behind the scene, and they work mostly on the extensions. Day by day developments are happening, and then it is given to the community. If we talk about the relational database like PostgreSQL, it has an SQL compliance. So if we are not already knowing about the SQL compliance, that means there is kind of directory which says I believe it is 177 features of SQL compliance. Say for example, the create table, select table, insert in the table, or these are some kind of SQL compliance. So there are about 177 SQL directory list. Out of that, PostgreSQL is meeting the condition of 170. So this is one of the relational database which is so close to the SQL compliance, and this is also known as the world's most advanced open source relational database. And as you have seen in the previous slide, all the topmost service provider of the cloud, they are working on it, and they have given it a place as a managed service. If we talk about the history, it was first in 1996, it was named as the Postgre, and it is it is successor of the database which was called as Ingress, right? And in 2007, it was renamed renamed to PostgreSQL because of its compatibility with SQL. And so PostgreSQL or Postgre, they are one and the same thing. What are the features of the PostgreSQL? Since we know it is SQL compliant, so it supports transaction. And if you say about the relational database, it has to support the ACID property. Say, for example, the bank application. Each and every transaction which is happening, it has to be atomic, consistent, isolated, and durable. We are not going to talk about what are those, but it is like it is so popular that it is trying to make its own place in the industry, right? And it is also being used as a data warehousing solution like Redshift cluster, which is being offered by AWS as PostgreSQL database managed service. And most of the database service providers in the cloud, if you talk about AWS, you talk about Google or Azure, they have provided the inbuilt support. They have the database migration services. What is that doing? It is making sure that whatever uh, uh, enterprise databases you have, using their service, you can transform that to, you can convert them to PostgreSQL. So it is not like 100% migration is automatic. There are some of the things wherein you have to take manual action because there is a difference in the engine, and it is a kind of heterogeneous migration. But the idea behind this is, if topmost service providers are providing this kind of migration services, that means PostgreSQL is doing great. And this is something which is asking all the engineers which are in this field to learn and work on about it. This is just a basic of the background history. Like 1982, it was called as Ingress, then it was called as Postgre, and it was being used in Berkeley. And then for the first time in 1994, it was released as Postgre 95 version was released, and now it is a version 3. And from 1996, its first release version 6.0 was released. Since then, it is in news, but in recent years, it has been very, very popular because of the kind of the community work which is happening, and the kind of support it is being brought up. And all the service providers, we talk about the cloud, they are offering new features and the extensions which are in place. So one of the most important feature of PostgreSQL is multi-version concurrency control. So it is like you can have concurrent access to data. And in the multi-version concurrent model, what is happening irrespective of the current state of the database, you can see a snapshot of the database, like how it was sometimes uh, ago. So it is something like you can see the data which was available earlier as well, though there are a lot of pros and cons which are causing the slowness in the database, and you have to perform some kind of vacuuming. You need to delete the dead tuples, but it is part of, and it is being offered as one of the best feature from PostgreSQL. It is synonymous to your locking mechanism, which is there in your enterprise level relational databases. So since it is not offering that kind of locking, uh, so it is becoming so popular. There is a concept of a schema like other enterprise relational databases. So you have this kind of concept over here. So you can create a schema over here. So multiple schema, and if you wanted to use the same name, so those can be used over here. So nothing different from others, but it is like these features are available. There is a huge support for different kind of database data types, and some of the newer type of data types which are not available in other databases. We are talking about both open source and the enterprise level relational databases. Asset compliance, we all know what it is, and PostgreSQL is compliant with that. That's why it is being used in most of the OLTP applications where this kind of compliance is required. We have a lot of database administration tool which are available. So if you're working in the cloud also, and since you do not have the access to SSH because we are using the service as a managed service, so port number 22 or that kind of accessibility to the operating system is taken away, but you have the tools using which you can connect to the database which is hosted in the cloud. So you can use PSQL, or you can use the pgadmin, or if you have PostgreSQL Studio, so you can use these. So as a cloud native tool, so PSQL is supposed to be one of the strongest tool in terms of the CLI. If you are familiar with the pgadmin, the administration of PostgreSQL is very, very simple. So these are some of the service providers which are there, apart from the three most uh, successful service provider of PostgreSQL in the cloud. So in 2007, it is Heroku who started providing the PostgreSQL as a managed service in the cloud, and it has been very, very successful. Looking on the footprints of those, PostgreSQL came up as an enterprise database by the company Enterprise DB, and it is providing a lot of features which are not being provided by other cloud service providers. So it is really doing great. When it was so successful, then the big cloud service providers like AWS, they started releasing it, and in the 2013 The first version of PostgreSQL in the cloud was released as a relational database service. In 2016 only, it released Aurora cluster which is a clustering solution, Postgre cluster, which I believe it has some 15 read replicas which you can create out of it. I believe that's the correct number. And then in 2017, Microsoft Azure released the Azure database for PostgreSQL. So the three big players, they have already released it. And then you have the Alibaba Cloud and IBM Cloud. They also release similar kind of PostgreSQL service. So in short, open source relational database service like PostgreSQL is making its place in the cloud, and it is doing really great. And that's all about it. I hope it's going to help. Thank you.